Actually not so. All right. Looks like we are going to begin shortly. Azine. Hi, Loretta here.
Hi, Loretta. My name is Ezine Uzo Okoro. Ezine resume that helps.
Ezine. Thank you very much. Sorry about that.
No, it's no problem.
Ezine. Got it. Thank you. We are so fortunate to have Ezine Uzo Okoro here with us today. She is currently serving at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, and she determines civil and commercial space policy priorities for the White House. Her portfolio includes orbital debris, in-space servicing, assembly and manufacturing, Earth observations, space weather, aeronautics, and planetary protection. In 17 years at NASA, she contributed to over 60 missions and programs as an engineer, technical expert, manager, and executive in Earth observations, planetary science, heliophysics, astrophysics, human exploration, and space communications, which represents $9.2 billion in total program value. At NASA headquarters, she led a heliophysics portfolio of missions, including the punch tracers and MAGIC within the Science Mission Directorate. At NASA Ames, she directed the Small Spacecraft Mission Design Division, including the Mission Design Center, led teams in developing advanced spacecraft mission concepts, and developed partnerships with government agencies. In several chief engineer roles, she provided oversight for over 20 programs on system engineering and software systems as technical authority. She led a mission design concept for a constellation of 8 small satellites. At NASA Goddard, within the space segment, she contributed significantly in areas of engineering leadership and technical development of flight hardware and software on several spacecraft missions, included TESS tests launched in 2018, NICER NICER launched 2017, GPM launched 2014, Constellation Program, Orion EFT-1 launched 2014, ELC launched 2009, and Cassini Saturn orbit insertion in 2004. Within the ground segment, she co-led the $300 million spacecraft communication and navigation integration project with JPL and NASA Glenn Partners. She served as the technical authority on over 20 mission operational readiness reviews. Within R&D, she led the development of remote sensing image registration algorithms, which resulted in NASA-owned registration algorithm patents. She holds an undergraduate degree in computer science from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute and master's degree in space systems, space robotics, and Science and Technology Policy from Johns Hopkins University, MIT, and Harvard University, respectively. She has completed a PhD at MIT on the robotics assembly of satellites. She founded terraformers.com to grow affordable food through productive and networked background gardens as a precursor to growing food in space. Her immigration status is profiled in George W. Bush's book, Out of Many, One. I just want to say thank you so much for being here with us. And we look forward, to having you give us comments on your fabulous position over at the White House. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Loretta. Thank you to Tim and to the Foundation for the Future for having me here. I look forward to not just talking about civil space, but also having a conversation. So thank you.
Thank you.
I did prepare some remarks to start with, and we'll start with what OSTP is, since that's where I live, and then I will kind of zoom out to space policy within the White House, within the EOP, and then I'll drill into some key policies and strategies that we are currently developing. So the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy provides the President and others within the Executive Office of the President with advice on scientific, engineering, and technological areas of all disciplines. We also lead interagency, meaning the entire US government, science and technology policy coordination efforts. We serve as a source of, again, science and technology analysis and judgment for the President with respect to major policies, plans, and programs, again, within the entire federal government. And we work closely with other policy councils within the Executive Office of the President, which is the EOP. And Loretta has kindly gone over some of the things I work on, but within OSTP, we have two segments, if you will, to our space portfolio. There's the civil and commercial portfolio, which I lead, and Loretta mentioned a number of things that I work on within that portfolio, aeronautics, Earth observations, and human exploration, and others that she mentioned, like orbital debris. We also have a security segment where we take a strategic, longer S&T focused look, a science and technology focused look at space security. And that is different from the National Security Council, which does, which looks at space, not just from the vantage point of today and strategy and policy, but also solves near-term issues. So when you step outside of OSTP and say outside the National Security Council, we also have the National Space Council, which is responsible for space policy at a very broad level. So they care about civil and commercial and security space. And what this means is we actually have a big team for the first time in the White House in space. So whenever any issue has a science and technology focus, someone from OSTP, usually me, will be in the room if it is a civil or commercial issue. And that's usually the case with anything space related. And then if it has a security issue, then the NSC is in the room, which is usually the case too, because there are just so many interdependencies, particularly today in space. And then again, if it has something to do with broad overarching space policy, then Space Council is in the room. So we all tend to take meetings together with our different, having our different lenses on a problem. Take orbital debris. I'm looking at it from a science and technology focus. NSC is looking at it from the national security lens. Space Council is looking at it from, an orbit authorization or a regulatory framework, if you will. So that's hopefully a picture of how we work here. And when you look at what we are all working on, or my portfolio, well, how did that come to be? We decide these things based on the priorities that the president and the administration lay out. And this administration cares about and values, one, resolving the pandemic, the economy, equity, climate, and restoring America's global leadership. So we don't have very much to offer with the COVID priority, but the others, we do actually have space-based research that helps with American preparedness for future pandemics. But we tend to focus our priorities on space policy priorities on the other administration priorities. And then last December, the administration also released the US Space Priorities Framework at the inaugural National Space Council meeting that we've had. At that meeting, the Vice President highlighted 3 areas where this administration will focus its efforts in space policy. The first is developing norms of behavior for space activities. And to show the progress on space norms, the Vice President announced on April 18th that we will be banning ASAT tests. And so that activity was one that was actually tasked to the National Security Council before some of the activity we've been seeing from strategic competitors. And then the second goal was using data gathered from space to monitor and mitigate the climate crisis, which we're doing already, and also aligns with the climate goal of the administration. The third is using science and technology to achieve next generation of scientific leadership, technological leadership, and also STEM leadership, so workforce leadership. And a lot of that, I come in the climate area and also with science and technology writ large, because that includes a lot of areas. I will focus on orbital debris and in-space assembly and manufacturing, and then we'll open it up to questions on that, or space weather, if you've got questions in geomagnetic storms or planetary protection or aeronautics or climate or Earth observations. And with orbital debris, to show that there is continuity of purpose, if you will, across multiple administrations, orbital debris is a great example of that. The last administration released an orbital debris research and development plan on our doorstep right before the transition. So it was released in January of 2021. And so we took that plan that was released in the last administration and re-engaged the same agencies. Some membership changed, but we started working towards building an implementation plan for that R&D plan. We looked at what was relevant to agencies that are current, what needed to be added. So for instance, the R&D plan really did focus on advancing R&D solely. But our implementation plan, which we're working now, focuses on not just R&D, but policy and some strategy. And there is some regulatory work that's in there. So we made it more encompassing. And what that means is, as I mentioned earlier, I not only worked with the federal government, the interagency, as we call it, I worked with also my colleagues at the National Security Council and the National Space Council. And I'm pointing this way and that because they're literally doors away. And so with this implementation plan for orbital debris, which will be released soon, we've been working on it for a few months. This plan will outline specific actions that agencies will engage in and carry out in the short term and in the long term. We will be prioritizing 3 categories, which again was actually the 3 categories in the R&D plan. So again, a continuity of purpose from one administration to the other. So the first category of this framework is debris prevention before launch, so debris mitigation. So it includes things like, what are you designing to a system before a satellite goes operational? What kind of shielding research do you have to conduct? What kind of designs do you need to build to reduce fragmentation and improve maneuverability. And then the second part of the framework is tracking, characterization, and modeling. How do you track debris? How do you find new debris? How do you find more debris? How do you improve uncertainty or improve the transition of actually research results into systems that are already operational? And then the third category of the framework is remediation or repurposing of debris. So we divide the challenges of remediation actually into two categories: small debris and large debris. And active debris removal is a very key part of that effort, because it's something that is of strong interest not only to the civil participants and the national security participants, but also to our commercial partners as well, our commercial entities as well. And I will say that one major goal of the interagency group is to ensure that we engage with the space community. And by engaging, we receive input, not just from commercial entities, but from academia and nonprofit stakeholders as well, on what actions are really the highest priorities and what will have the highest impact that the government should focus on, and where are the opportunities for academia. So we have engaged with the public in a few ways. We put out a request for comment last November, and for 2 months received inputs from commercial companies and nonprofits and academia. We held 2 listening sessions, one on debris mitigation and another on debris remediation. So, people prefer different modes of providing inputs. And so we held both. I will say that the request for comment was probably more successful because we received, 50 pages each from companies. But we got some of the smaller startups to show their interest in listening sessions. And then the third thing we did was actually we held a workshop co-hosted with actually AFOSR, so the Air Force. And what we found was just a lot of, this was focused on tracking and characterization of debris. And we found was a lot of input that we hadn't even thought about. So very soon, we will be releasing this implementation plan that, again, has taken in all of this, all these data gathering results. And I can share with you that the top thing most people asked for was remediation of debris. So active debris removal is what concerns and what most people would like the government to do. And then the second to fifth top items were all around tracking and characterization. People wanted to understand more about what kind of debris we had in space. So right now, we're actually in the process of receiving concurrence from agencies that have been, departments and agencies that have been given these actions. And we hope to release them soon for the public to see what these agencies have committed to. And one thing I will note here, in the same way that there are just so many interdependencies on national security issues, or on civil and commercial issues that involve national security space. I find the same thing in all of the areas I work with. I did not come in here expecting to actually spend a lot of time on security space, but I work very closely with the DoD and very closely with my colleague on the National Security Council, who also did not intend to track a lot of civil and commercial things as closely as she does now. So we both understand and see the interdependencies and the needs and the synergies, really, of what's going on the commercial side, and how it could influence or impact, or what the opportunities are for the Department of Defense and the IC community. So there has been a lot of coming together, really, and sometimes, at least with some of my areas, and this occurred with the in-space servicing, assembly, manufacturing. There were components within the DoD who actually asked for a seat at the table, or within the IC who asked for a seat at the table, that we did not expect. So there just is so much coordination that we are doing that is improving. I think just awareness and transparency across the board within the federal government of who is doing what, and not just in the government, but also in industry, so that the IC learns more about, for instance, things that contractors or commercial providers that NASA works with that could be helpful to them, and then NASA is learning from the DoD. So it's just, there is a lot of opportunity that has come from convening everyone together. So let me touch on in-space servicing, assembly, manufacturing for a little bit before we open it up to questions. So for in-space servicing, assembly, and manufacturing, it was really a niche that, and I'm a bit biased, my PhD is on the topic. So it's a niche that was called on-orbit servicing, assembly, and manufacturing. And it is something that we would not traditionally elevate, but it was clear to me that it helped and fit in with our priority of the economy, our priority around restoring America's global leadership, and even equity, the STEM piece around equity. And it also aligned with what we included in the space priorities framework, the priorities that we included in that framework. And so, and the language we wrote there really was that we wanted to signal to commercial, civil, and academic and international communities that we will prioritize capabilities that will enable us to explore further in space. Now, what does that mean? It means that what was traditionally called, and probably is still being called, OSAM in some sectors, which is in some pockets, which is on-orbit servicing, assembly, and manufacturing, really includes technologies and capabilities that are not only valid for for different orbital regimes, but also valid for surfaces like the lunar surface and what's happening with the Lunar Gateway and the Artemis program, and also for Mars. So that's why it made sense to develop something called the in-space servicing, assembly, and manufacturing rather than stick with on-orbit. And the strategy that we developed and released on April 4th last month really provides 6 strategic ways that we see our opportunities to sustain U.S. leadership in space and provide a lot of benefits and capabilities to the commercial sector, really make space open for business while supporting the U.S. government. So the 6 strategic goals are, the first is advancing R&D. The second is prioritizing expanding key infrastructure at scale, key infrastructure like platforms and future space stations, and not just the one we have, and other defense systems in space. The third goal is accelerating the commercial sector and empowering them by giving them the signal, because one of the challenges we kind of heard a lot of feedback on was that the demand signal for in-space servicing, assembly, manufacturing from the government, who's primarily the customer today, isn't really commonplace. So that was the objective of that goal. And the fourth goal is promoting international cooperation, collaboration on cooperative norms that we have around on-orbit servicing and space manufacturing. And what more can we do together to foster U.S. commercial entity collaborations with international companies, for instance, international countries. Because, for instance, if you think of there's a company right now that refuels satellites in orbit, but our mission authorization has not caught up with a situation where a U.S. entity docks with a non-U.S. entity, because then at that stage, who owns, whose license is used and who owns the system when they are two that are joined together. When they're separate, one's a U.S. satellite and the other is, an Italian satellite, let's just say, for instance, but when they're joined. So, things like that are coming up based on these capabilities that we need to promote. And the fifth strategy is on prioritizing environmental sustainability. And the sixth is on inspiring our workforce. So with that, I will turn it over to you all for questions. I could keep going about other areas, but I thought that might be the two areas which have the most synergy with the IC community and the Department of Defense that might be of interest. Laura, what do you think?
Well, first I want to say that, wow, you just have covered so much base here, and it's just fascinating. And I really appreciate everything you've gone over for us. And one thing that I find fascinating is the whole orbital debris problem. And I will admit that I have not been online in the last few weeks to see, but is there still, was it NASA, or I don't know if it was NOAA that had the, you could go and you could see the debris in space? Do you know if that's still out there for you to see? And just so you know, I was at Department of Commerce when they were standing up the Space Council, and that was something that they highlighted to say, this is why we need the Space Council, because we have these problems in space and nobody's addressing them. And I just didn't know if they still had that, because when you look at that, you realize just how critical it is. But I'm wondering, has anything improved? Have we made any improvements in orbital debris?
Well, that's a great question. There's a yes and a no, and we are moving in that in the direction of yes in all areas generally. But I will say that there continues to be, and some people have study fatigue, so there continues to be study upon study on characterization of debris and modeling of debris, which is helpful for our operators, our satellite operators, and including our civil space agencies and our defense agencies as well, components as well. However, when you have things like an anti-satellite test that creates a lot of debris and causes that kind of disruption, then, that's why it was important for us to take that stand on the policy that the Vice President announced last month on Space North and banning ASAT tests. But you just see us meaning the international, global, us taking a step back in that realm. But we believe that there are lots of steps in the yes category. There are companies coming up, demonstrating active debris removal in space. There are companies that are demonstrating or have repurposing ideas. There are companies that are the launch transportation sector within space is focused on also mitigation, because it's important to them, and they are taking actions in those areas. So I would say that all around there are more things in the yes column than I think there are in the no, but we're working on both.
Got it. And let's see.
Oh, and if there's a chat, I'm not able to see. The White House Zoom does not have a chat function, so if there is one, I cannot see it.
Okay, that's okay. I'm monitoring it. That's fine. Another thing that I'm curious about, since you are right in the thick of it, is the accountability. I mean, who is handing out tickets in space when you have the bad actors? Where are we with that? Where are we with policing space right now when there are bad actors that are, if you want to, responsible for the orbital debris that we know of. Have we been able to at all either find them, give them some sort of tickets, have any type of accountability, or is that still all in play right now at a global level talks?
So, I think that when we have these LSGs that are developed by Copius, we've got these international bodies who that we are members of, obviously, and these international treaties that we follow and we adhere to. However, some of these guidance, do have, they're guides. They're not requirements, if you will. That's right. So because they're guides, they're just it's so broad, it can be interpreted in multiple ways. And I think that what we need to do is show leadership in our laws surrounding orbital debris, our regulations, and I think we have some of the most stringent when it comes to actually regulations in that area, and we will continue to lead by example, and then work with our international partners through those bodies to move the international community closer to a place where guidelines become quantifiable, if you will.
It is the wild, wild west right now. It is the new frontier. And even though we feel like with all our technologies that we are so sophisticated, it is hard to know all the different layers and levels and to have the accountability right now. It's crazy. Let's see. Let me double check the questions, see if anyone's got a question right now, because I'm just fascinated by your whole portfolio. When you talk about the manufacturing in space, how far advanced are we right now? Like, what is being manufactured in space right now? Are we,
we do have some 3D capabilities, additive manufacturing capabilities, and are able to print a few things in the International Space Station. But NASA has two missions. It's the OSAM-1 mission, the OSAM-2 mission. Again, OSAM's on orbit servicing, assembly, manufacturing. And I think the OSAM-2 mission is focused on actually manufacturing trusses and structures in space, and that should be launching in less than 2 years, I believe. So there's a lot of activity leading that one has to do to lead up to actual manufacturing. There is, processing of raw materials in space or taking up raw materials from here. And, there is a lot of activity around mining as well to ensure that we get to a place where we can feed in our machines to manufacture in space.
It makes sense that we don't have to constantly be reliant on going back and forth if there could be that capability. So it's very fascinating.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am just so thrilled to have you. I know everybody here is so thankful, and I just think it's a wonderful portfolio, and that you're taking charge. And as a woman that was over at Small Business Administration at the International Trade Administration, I just love that you have all this fantastic dynamics, and you're leading the charge for space for us. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And we hope to see more of you as we do other programs. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
All right. Thank you. So I guess that wraps it up for everybody that is on right now. Thank you so much, and we look forward to having you join us for future programs, for conversations for the future. Thank you so much.